Gotta talk to the guys about this. I need to understand what's going on. So I go to McDonald's to get some food and I see two kids around middle school age. Honestly, I don't know how old kids are if you're under 18. Y'all all look the same age if you're a teenager. So I'm trying to get some food and these two kids are slapboxing each other, just whatever. They're having fun. I don't really care. So I order my food and I'm waiting for it and I see one of the workers carrying a bunch of food in her hands and is going to deliver it to some people waiting outside of the drive-thru. So I see her holding all that and I'm like, oh, let me go get the door. So I get the door, I hold it open for her, and then I come back inside and I sit down. I'm waiting for my food. I'm on my phone and I hear the two boys whispering each other and laughing, and they're saying some shit like, oh, women can't open doors for themselves. It's two little boys talking like they listen to red pill podcasts. That sounds so embarrassing even to hear them talking like that. And it just shows immaturity, the young lady who I opened the door for, she looked like she was about 70 pounds carrying 30 pounds of food. I don't understand where that's coming from, but it has to be coming from the guys. You know what I mean? I don't know if they're hearing this in school also with their friends, but it's just plain weird. But that's not even everything. So while waiting for food, they're still slapboxing each other, whatever, inside the lobby. And then this Spanish girl walks in, I guess is around their age, and immediately they stop. Now you know where I'm going with this, right? They know how immature and shit they look, slapboxing, acting a fool, and then they see a girl walk in. Obviously, they start feeling a type of way, and they stop what they're doing, and then they leave. They know how they should be acting, and I just heard them, not even a minute ago, talking some red pill shit about, oh, girls, they should let women do all this and for themselves. And I just held open a door. But obviously, some little girl that they find attractive comes in the room and they shut up, they start switching up, and then they stop what they're doing because it looks a little embarrassing. What they said was super embarrassing, feeding that to each other, and they're little fucking boys. Is this really what's happening? Is this what happens when kids who shouldn't be on the internet are on the internet and they see what men are talking about? Because I do not subscribe to that shit. What happened to integrity? What happened to character? What happened to standing on your own business? These boys are out here talking like they're living lives of these red pill podcasters, when in reality, they're in lower middle class income neighborhoods with mommy's money in their pocket at McDonald's. This is a bad direction. This is bad.
All right, all right. So the phrase red pill used to come from the Matrix. It meant waking up to truth, seeing reality for what it is. But over the last decade, it's evolved into something else entirely. On the internet, especially in certain male focused spaces, red pill now refers to a worldview about gender roles, relationships, and masculinity, one that often centers on dominance, hyper independence, and deep skepticism of women's intentions. And somehow this ideology isn't just resonating with grown men, it's reaching kids. Platforms like YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram are flooded with short form content that boils these ideas down into digestible, edgy sound bites, quote unquote, don't be a simp. Women only care about money. Alpha males don't hold doors. And these phrases are repeated over and over, framed as wisdom, confidence, or being a man. And the algorithms love it. They push this content to younger and younger viewers, especially boys who are curious, impressionable, and trying to make sense of the world around them. Now, if you think about that, middle schoolers barely old enough to understand relationships are repeating red pill takes like they're gospel. and they don't have life experience. They don't understand the complexities of adult relationships, power dynamics, or emotional intelligence. But they do understand clout, shock value, and what gets likes. So instead of growing up learning through human interaction, through mistakes, through kindness, or through empathy, they're learning from influencers who tell them that emotions are weakness and respect is only earned through dominance. The result, you get two kids in McDonald's making fun of someone for holding the door open, not because they really believe it's wrong, but because they've been taught that anything remotely courteous might make them look soft. And they're not thinking for themselves. They're mimicking content creators who speak with certainty and charisma, men who claim to have it all figured out when in reality they often is just as lost. And that's where things get dangerous, because when you take an incomplete, often toxic idea and hand it to someone without the maturity to analyze it, you don't get critical thinkers. You get parrots, and those parrots grow into adults with broken perspectives. And if you switch the perspectives for a second, the original story got a lot of traction online, not because of the kids, but because of the reaction of it, the reaction it provoked. People in the comments, and even other content creators, started tearing into the narrator. One voice in particular flipped the whole situation on its head, suggesting that the real problem wasn't the kids acting out; it was the adult being too sensitive. Why are you so bothered? They asked. They just kids. They cracked a joke, and now you're emotional about it. And you know what? That was the things that were said. But you know what? On the surface, it's a fair challenge. There's a point to be made here. Not every moment needs to be a moral crisis. Kids joke, they tease. That's how they test boundaries. That's how they learn. Sometimes we interpret harmless behavior through the lens of adult expectations, and in doing so, we lose the nuance. But here's where the counter argument breaks down. The critique quickly veers into the personal, and the narrator is accused of being overly emotional, called a simp, told he's butthurt for making a video in the first place. And just like that, we're no longer debating ideas. We're shaming emotions, and we're attacking a man for expressing discomfort for trying to engage in conversation about values. So, ironically, that's the exact kind of behavior that red pill culture promotes. It dismisses emotions, shame vulnerability, and label any deviation from alpha energy as weakness. It's no longer about logic or reason. It's about winning the moment, mocking the other side, and maintaining a performance of toughness at all costs. But here's the truth. It is possible to reflect on a moment without being soft. It is okay to feel weird when you see kids internalizing messages that strip away empathy. That doesn't make you emotional, it makes you aware. Sure, the narrator ignored the kids. He could have brushed it off, but instead he chose to share the moment publicly, not to complain, but to ask, what does this say about the culture we're creating? That's not weakness, that's engagement. The bigger irony in this is the people calling him soft are doing the very thing they accuse him of, getting defensive, feeling attacked, and lashing out. So who's really being emotional? And let's talk about slapboxing for a second. That small detail in the story might seem insignificant, but is actually one of the most telling parts. Two boys slapboxing in McDonald's lobby, harmless, immature, sure, but it's toxic masculinity. Not necessarily. See, roughhousing has always been part of growing up for boys. It's how many young boys or young men build bonds, test limits, and establish social order without it being real violence. It's not always graceful or polite, but it's not always harmful either. Slapboxing, wrestling, play fighting is how boys learn physical boundaries, control, and even respect. The problem isn't slapboxing. The problem is what gets layered on top of it, the mocking, the posturing, the performative disrespect disguised as wisdom. That's when it stops being play and starts being a performance. And the audience is no longer just your friends in the lobby. It's the idea of masculinity you think you're supposed to live up to. And in a healthy environment, these moments are part of the learning process. A good mentor, an engaged parent, an older sibling sometimes steps in and say, hey, it's okay to be strong and kind. You don't need to mock someone to feel powerful. But today, boys aren't always learning from people around them. They're learning from strangers on screens, many of whom are acting out their own trauma in front of millions. And the result is kids trying to act hard, not because they feel confident, but because they think appearing confident means rejecting vulnerability. And once again, we confuse masculinity with aggression because masculinity isn't the issue. It never was. There's nothing wrong with being strong, assertive, or competitive, but masculinity, when it's untethered, from emotional intelligence, integrity, or humility turns into something hollow. You get boys who slap box because they want to impress each other, but then laugh at a man for doing something decent. You get kids turn off their immaturity. You get kids who can turn off their immaturity for the second a girl walks in because deep down they know how to act. They just don't think the behavior matters unless it benefits them. So what are we really teaching them? Are we giving them the tools to be well-rounded men, or just handing them scripts that reward dominance and mock vulnerability? The slap boxing itself, that's not the issue. The belief that kindness is weakness, that's the real threat. At the core of the entire story is a much deeper issue, and it goes beyond joke, slap boxing, or even red pill content. It's about the difference between integrity and image. What we see in the McDonald's lobby wasn't just about kids being immature. It was a glimpse into how young boys are starting to measure themselves not by who they are, but how they look. Not in the sense of fashion or style, but in terms of public perception. Everything else is about performance now. They made a fun of a man for opening the door, not because they actually believe that helping someone is wrong, but because they think appearing independent and undefected is the goal. They stopped slackboxing when a girl walked in, not because they matured in the moment, because they realized their image mattered. They know how they're supposed to act. They're choosing to act based on audience, not principles, and that's the real concern here. And we're raising a generation of boys who are fluent in aesthetics but illiterate in values. And they know what a high value man looks like, but they don't know what true integrity feels like. They learn how to mimic strength without understanding responsibility. They know how to talk about standing on business, but haven't been taught what actually that entails. Like showing up when it's inconvenient, telling the truth when it costs you, or doing the right thing when no one's watching. Image says, don't open that door, you'll look weak. Integrity says, she carrying a heavy load, help her. Image says, mock 'em, be the alpha. Integrity says, learn to listen, learn to lead. This isn't a call to shame boys for being immature. Immaturity is part of growing up, but it's a call to rethink examples we're setting and the messages we're promoting, especially online. Because when the loudest voices are more concerned with appearances than values, we create a culture where boys are afraid to be kind and too proud to be curious. And if we don't address that, then what starts in McDonald's lobbies end up everywhere: schools, jobs, relationships, and eventually adulthood. A generation acting tough but built on sin. So here we are, a story that started with fast food, slap boxing, and a couple jokes end up pulling back the curtain on something much bigger. What kind of men are we shaping and how we're shaping them? These weren't grown adults in a heated debate. These were kids still in their formative years, repeating adult talking points that don't even fully understand. And while that might seem like a harmless sign of the times, it actually reflects a deeper failure of mentorship. We create an environment where content is raising boys more than community, where YouTube clips replace real conversations, where shouting over others get labeled as leadership, and where emotional restraint is misinterpreted as emotional suppression. And then we're surprised when a 13-year-old mocks kindness or when a teenager thinks respect is weakness. But what do we expect? This isn't just about red pill ideology. This is about the vacuum that exists when boys don't have healthy models of manhood, when boys aren't taught how to integrate strength and softness, leadership, and in listening, action and reflection. And it's not enough just to tell them what not to do. We have to show them what to do, and we have to live it. Because right now, a lot of boys are becoming men who know how to mimic confidence but crumble under accountability, who know how to talk about standing on business but collapse when it's time to show character. No amount of posturing will make up for what has been developed inside. So if you're a parent, a teacher, an older sibling, a coach, anyone who has influence, understand this. Boys are listening. Even when you think they aren't, even when they're slapboxing in the lobby, even when they're quoting influencers, what you model carries weight than what you tell them. Your actions matter more than your aesthetic. And the rest of us watching from the sidelines, maybe we should stop clowning people for caring and start asking ourselves why so many boys are confusing cruelty for confidence. This isn't about one man holding the door. It's about we, what we hold the door open to. Are we giving boys a path to genuine growth, or just locking them in a cycle of surface level strength from performative masculinity? The difference could define a generation where then you have a cycle of generations of degenerates, as they would like to call it. Let me know what you guys thoughts down in the comments below. As always, family, peace.